G'day guys, Cam Wild Touring and welcome to another video. I'm really excited to share this video with you today. I'm going to be chatting about my 24 volt battery build in our new Willow RV Boab caravan. So this is without a doubt my absolute favourite part of this caravan. All this work was done by Offroad Living, who are in Wangara in Perth. Jason's the owner there. Andy is his lead auto electrician. He's actually dual trade. He's an auto sparky and a mechanic. And he is absolutely brilliant at the work he does, and he's knocked this one totally out of the park. Just a couple of things before we get started. I just want to reiterate that I am certainly not an auto electrician. I'm not an electrician, and I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, let alone to do with caravans. So what I will do is I'll get Jason to have a little bit of a chat about the specific sort of technical stuff in relation to this system, because I don't want to mince my words. I want to get this right for you. But I'll do my best to explain what this system does and how it works. Anyway, it's all hidden underneath here. It's one of the best installs I've ever seen. I can honestly say that. Let's show you. So, right under here. When I bought this caravan from Willow, it came with one 100 amp hour AGM, a lead acid battery. But yeah, this will look very different in a couple of days. I upgraded the fridge in this caravan to a compressor fridge, so that one single battery would have really struggled to run all this stuff. I chose it specifically like that, and I'm pretty sure the dealer warned me. He said you're going to struggle with one battery. Willow did have different upgrades available. You could put a second lead acid battery in, and I'm sure there was a lithium upgrade pack as well. I didn't want to go with the offerings from Willow just because I wasn't familiar with the setup that they were putting into these caravans. I was always going to go with Offroad Living because I've been running their Allspark Lithium batteries for about 6 years now, and they've been all over the country in all sorts of corrugations and heat and being bounced around the back of my Canopy and the D-Max, and they've just done a fantastic job. I've never had an issue, so it was always going to be Allspark batteries. Check this out. And here we go, guys. This is the heart of the caravan now. Every time I lift this bed and I have a look at this system, I'm just in absolute awe. These blokes have done such a wicked job. So what we're looking at here is two 24 volt 120 amp hour Allspark lithium batteries. I've got these two wired in parallel, so overall the battery bank is going to remain 24 volt, but we're going to double our capacity. So that means this is a 24 volt 240 amp hour battery bank. For those of you that are more familiar with 12 volt sort of figures, that would be 480 amp hour at 12 volt. So it's by no means the biggest system out there. There's heaps of people running bigger stuff, but this was a system that was designed for what we need, with obviously weight, budget, how much room we've got, and all those other sort of considerations taken into place. One of the most important things to factor in is, are you going to be able to recharge the system? Because it's great to have an 800, 900 amp hour battery bank, but if you've only got 1,000, 1,200 watts of solar, you're going to have a pretty hard time recharging that thing unless you have days on end of perfect conditions. So these are all the things that we took into consideration, and it's probably a good time to say that there is no one battery system that's going to be perfect for everyone. Not everyone needs lithium, and not everyone needs an enormous expensive system. It's really important to figure out how much power you're going to consume in your caravan, your car, your motorhome, your camper trailer, whatever. How much solar you can fit on, how you're going to recharge it, and then size your system from all those sort of considerations. Or if you're not sure how to do that, speak to someone that knows what they're talking about and somebody that you can trust. Certainly don't go off YouTube videos or chatting to Facebook experts and some of these groups. Have a chat to a real industry professional. Someone like Jason or any of his team there at Offroad Living, I could absolutely recommend chatting to them, and they've certainly helped me when I've had queries with stuff like this. And they've designed this system. This was, I can't take too much credit for this. This is pretty much all them. I had an idea how much power I'm going to need, but I went into their office thinking, we're going to do a 12 volt build. And then when we sat down and we crunched all the numbers and we figured it out, we realized that 24 volt was going to be better for my application. And I'll chat a little bit about that in a minute, why that. There's no massive wins going 24 volt, but there's no negatives. There's a lot of little positives that overall make it worthwhile doing. But yeah, we'll chat further about that, and I'll get Jason to put in his 2 cents, because he really knows what he's talking about. So interestingly, when you stick two batteries like this in parallel, as I said, the capacity doubles. So now this is a 240 amp hour battery bank, but also the max continuous discharge current, the max charge current, all those kind of things double as well in a parallel orientation like this. So individually, each one of these batteries is capable of 175 amp maximum continuous discharge current. That's a 24 volt, remember. That's just over 4,000 watts. So you could run 4,000 watts of appliances off this, which is getting pretty bloody huge. With two of these in parallel, it's about 8,000 watts. That would be an enormous inverter and far more power than I would ever consume at one time. So what we went with was an Allspark 3,000 watt inverter. So this is a 24 volt 3,000 watt inverter. You can get inverters this size in 12 volt, but there is a couple of downsides if you do that in 12 volt. First of all, the reputable ones are extremely expensive. And second of all, 3,000 watts is a massive load on 12 volts. So you'd end up with enormous cables running from it, which are going to be slightly more expensive. They're going to be harder to actually route to get the radius and stuff for the bends that you're going to need to route it neatly. And also, once you start going thicker cables, everything gets heavier. And depending on how far your inverter is from your battery, you may need thicker cables again, and you're adding more and more weight. So I think this is the sweet spot in terms of price and sizing. So 3,000 watts, that means that I'll be able to run my Aircon, or we'll be able to run my Aircon off this battery system off grid. And I'll also be able to run the air fryer or the microwaves or something at the same time. If you get a much smaller inverter than that, once you start going to 2,000 watts, even 2,500 watts, you're going to struggle to run a couple of those appliances at the same time. Not a biggie, but just something to take into consideration. So on that note, what the lads have done, they run that inverter, goes up to an RCD up here. This is going to change shortly for reasons I'll explain later. But what I can do if I'm charging off shore power, there's a changeover switch there. So if I'm plugged into a caravan park or whatever, if I'm off grid and I want to run everything off the inverter, I flick this down and I would turn my inverter on here. So where I'm plugged right now, we're just running off batteries, and I've got the microwave, the aircon can operate, and also there's a washing machine in the bathroom over there. Right, what else is going on down here? I've got a mix of Victron and Enerdrive gear. I've just gone with I don't have any sort of brand preference, I've just gone with what works best for my application. So I have two of these Victron MPPT solar controllers. There's one here, and there's also one tucked away over here looking after the factory panels that came on the Willow. I'll chat about the solar a little bit later on. For 240 volt charging off mains power at caravan parks or home or whatever, I've got the Victron 16 amp smart charger there, so that's looking after that. There's no point putting a massive AC charger on these things if the application is for it to be plugged in overnight. There's no point spending the extra money. So that's not a massive charger, but it's going to be on for 8 to 10 hours minimum. And then I'm going to have a lot of solar input and alternator input as well. So there wasn't any point going huge on that. I've gone again with another Enerdrive DC charger. This one's 30 amp, it's 24 volt. Now the reason I've gone Enerdrive again over Victron, because Victron do a nice unit too, Red Arc do a nice unit. The Enerdrive just works a little bit better for my application. It is a 24 volt charger, so it'll charge that battery bank at the correct voltage, but it has 12 volt and 24 volt input. So whether I'm towing this with a truck that's got a 24 volt battery system, or with my car that has a 12 volt battery system, that'll accept both inputs. It'll also accept lower voltage solar panels. So that has an MPPT input for another array of solar. I've got that solar input routed through to my drawbar so I can plug a solar panel in. So I can use a normal 12 volt solar panel. I don't have to go a higher voltage panel to try charge off 24 volts. So that was pretty cool. The other thing I really like about the Enerdrive is that it's easily programmable. It's got that digital display on the front. And what I'm going to do, what I've already done already, is I've throttled down the amount of current that's going to come in from the car. I have a similar size charger in the back of the Canopy. Your average car, like the D-Max, has a 90 to 130 amp alternator. Mine's the smaller, unfortunately, it's only 90 amp. So running the car, charging the cranking battery that starts the car, and then also powering the battery bank in the Canopy and the Caravan is a massive task. I've got heaps of solar on the roof, so there's no point in maxing that out at 30 amp and robbing power from the car. So that'll be throttled down to 10, 20 amp, depending on what I need. But it's so easily programmable that if the battery bank is really discharged and there's no sun out, I can crank that back up to 30 amp. I can switch the one off inside the canopy, and I can prioritize which battery bank I want to charge. So that's going to be really handy, especially in unfavorable weather conditions. So that's why I went the Enerdrive. What else have we got here? That would be a 24 to 12 volt step down converter. I think that's what they're called. So what that does is the battery bank's all 24 volt, obviously, but all the electrics that came standard in the Caravan, like the like the range hood and all the lights and all the rest of it, they're all going to be 12 volt, and they all run through the factory projector system here, and that's all going to be 12 volt. So that little blue box there, that converts everything from 24 volt to 12 volt so that we can use the factory wiring through the rest of the Caravan. So this is what came standard with the Caravan. This is a Projector PM300, I think, and it is an AC charger, a DC charger, and basically a distribution board, like a fuse board. I'm still using all the factory fuses. I'm not using the AC charging circuit anymore. Like I said, we're going to use the Victron smart charger there because that has 24 volt output. This one didn't. And I'm also not going to use this to manage the solar anymore. The reason I'm not going to use it to manage the solar anymore is because the way the panels are wired on the roof, the voltage wouldn't be high enough to charge our 24 volt system. So we rewired the factory panels so that they're now running in series to boost the voltage, and then they'll run through a dedicated solar controller so we can get, because these have a 24 volt output for the battery as well. So there you go, clear as mud. Geez, I can't believe I got all that out and I didn't make any mistakes. Not that I noticed anyway. What else is there to talk about? Lots. So with lithium batteries, you need a way to be able to monitor the state of charge. It's not as simple as lead acid batteries where you can pretty much just have a look at the voltage and you can determine how much charge is in the batteries. With lithium, the voltage is really, really stable until they're pretty much empty, and then it just takes a big dive. So what you do is you run everything through a shunt. Now, luckily, the projector unit actually came with a shunt on board anyway, so we've used the factory shunt, whereas normally I would have put like a Victron BMV 712 like I have in my Canopy. Didn't have to on this one. I can use the factory shunt, which is really handy because it means now I get real-time accurate information on the factory panel that was installed in this van. So it meant I saved a little bit of money there. I needed to keep this anyway because it's giving me how much water capacity is left in the tanks, but it's working quite well for our application. So here it's telling me the voltage of the 24 volt batteries. It's telling me direct from that shunt how much current is coming in and out, and then up here it's telling me from the distribution board what the 12 volt side of things is doing. So from the 12 volt side of things, it's sitting at 13.1 volts. And it's drawing 6 amp. That's all the lights and stuff on. Down here, the 24 volt battery bank is sitting at 27 volts, and there's pretty much nothing coming off it. And the reason is that there's a little bit, although we have fairly cloudy conditions, there's a little bit of solar coming in, and it's enough to offset all the power that's being used, so I'm not actually drawing anything off my battery banks. And then that's reflected by a percentage and this little drawing, and it tells me what the state of charge of the battery is. So far it's working well. We'll see how it goes in the future. But if I need to, it's easy to add another aftermarket battery monitor like the Victron, and I'd have plenty of space there to mount it. But for now, I think that's working pretty well. Right, a couple more little things on the board they've done here, which is just beautiful. These are their surface mounted Allspark branded circuit breakers. They're really nice, and Offroad Living are also doing their own bus bars now. They're a copper insulated bus bar. Very nice. It just makes for a really neat install. By the way, if the boys from Offroad Living are watching this, I'm sorry about that little sucker. I've added that. I had to pinch some power for the diesel heater, so they didn't leave it like that. That was me. Sorry, lads. I know I've ruined the neatness of it all. I think that's basically it down there. Now we can talk about solar. Up top, we've got 1080 watts of panel From factory, this thing came with two 170 watt panels, so 340 watts. Those panels are the two at the back there. They've been retained, they're still being used, but they've been rewired now so that they're now in series just to boost up the voltage so we can charge this 24 volt battery bank. Because originally they would have been designed for charging a 12 volt battery bank, so the voltage was a fair bit lower. The four new panels you can see up there are Allspark branded glass panels. So we've got three 200 watt, and the smaller one there is 135 watt, I believe. Now, they're wired in pairs as well, in series, again, to boost the voltage. There's no dramas running that smaller one wired in series with one of the 200 watt ones because the voltage is the same. It doesn't matter that the current is different, as long as the voltage is the same, it performs really well. So we ended up adding about 735 watts to the existing 340 watts, giving us a total of 1085 watts, which I'm absolutely wrapped with. There was a small space left up here that we could have put another panel, but we've left that because I'm going to get a CARAVAN Sahara dust reduction system fit there in a couple of weeks' time. In terms of what sort of output we're going to get from these panels in good conditions, it's hard to say right now at the moment. And the reason is I've been away for a couple of nights in this caravan already, and we were running, I wasn't running the aircon, but we were running waffle cookers and the microwave and a few other things like that. So we got a little bit of a discharge going. The fridge uses quite a lot of power. We're only down to about 80% by the morning, just using normal sort of stuff, which is about right. But what happens is there's quite a lot of, I got up to about 15 amps at 24 volt or 30 amps at 12 volt of current coming in from the panels in the early morning before the sun was even in the middle of the sky. And the battery system was fully recharged before the sun hit that peak position right above the panels. So far the max I've seen is 15 amp at 24 volt, 30 amp at 12 volt. But that's because it fully recharged before the sun was right up. I think if I was really deeply discharged, like sort of 60, 50%, like for instance, if I was running the aircon a fair bit and the sun is right up top in the sort of peak solar position, I think we should see around 40 amp at 12 volt. So yeah, but I'll let you know as we're actually traveling and using the aircon on hot days and stuff. I'll let you know how it goes. So the way that all the solar was wired up, the two original panels are running through one Victron regulator. The four new panels are running through another Victron regulator. So we have two separate strings there. A couple of reasons for doing this. One of the really interesting benefits is if the sun is low in the sky and it's creating a shadow off your aircon unit on the roof or one of your hatches or whatever, and one of your panels is in shade, you don't lose the whole string. So the other string will still perform and still put current in. So that's really interesting. Another interesting benefit of wiring them through their own dedicated solar controllers is that while I'm driving, I'm not using the solar input on the DC-DC charger. So as I'm driving, theoretically, there's nothing stopping me to getting 30 amp in from the car and 30 to 40 amp in from the solar panels at the same time. I could potentially have 60 to 80 amp coming in. So if I'm really deeply discharged, if I've been running the aircon all day and I go for a drive to the next camp spot for a couple of hours, that's going to recharge pretty quickly. Now, I'm sure someone would have asked a question, because I know I would have wanted to know. How long can I run the aircon off-grid in good conditions? Now, to tell you the truth, I don't know yet because I haven't done it. We are pushing up north in the next week or so, so hopefully the conditions are favourable enough or warm enough to be able to run this thing for a while and see. But going off the figures, that draws 4.2 amp at 240 volt, which is about 1000 watts. At 24 volt, that is about 40 amp. Now I should have about 20 amp at 24 volt coming in through the solar in good conditions, which leaves a 20 amp at 24 volt deficit off my 240 amp hour 24 volt battery system. That would give me a theoretical run time of like 10 to 11 hours. But that's not realistic because I have a compressor fridge. If it's really hot enough to be running the aircon, then the compressor fridge is probably running pretty hard too. We've got lights on and off. We're drawing power elsewhere, and we also we're never going to draw that battery bank to zero because the BMS that look after these batteries won't allow me to fully discharge them. They won't allow me to damage the batteries. They're pretty clever. If you reverse polarity, you get a dead short. You charge too high, they get too hot. You run them too low, they automatically open a circuit inside themselves, so you can't damage them. Which is one of the main benefits of lithium, other than being lightweight and lasting a hell of a long time. So I think, we're getting a bit of rain now, I think realistically, I could comfortably get 4 to 6 hours of running that aircon in good sunny conditions with sun on the solar panels. But I will let you know as we find out. Now, as I've mentioned throughout the video, there is a lot of small gains for running 24 volt and there's no real negatives. So I think if you've got similar needs to me and you're looking at a similar size system, it could be an option for you. I actually sat down with Jason, the managing director of Offroad Living, and he gave me 10 minutes of his time to have a bit of a chat about those reasons why we chose 24 volt in this build. So I'll roll that now. All right, thanks for chatting on camera, Jace, because I know not everyone wants to. So this is Jason Glossop, owner, operator of Offroad Living.
Yep.
Jason's helped me out with this build. He's done a fantastic job. I'm going to run you all through it shortly if I haven't already on this video. What I wanted to get Jason on camera for was to explain specifically why we went 24 volt. I've got a little bit of an idea about it, but I just don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to mislead people with misinformation. Yep. So why do we go 24 volt on this build as opposed to the 12 volt builds we've done previously together?
Yeah, look, it comes down to assessing the loads, the appliances that you're going to run on any individual build. So if it was just a four-wheel drive, running a fridge and some lights and a few minor other 12 volt loads, well, you stick with 12 volt. That's what the devices are made to run off. And it's quite straightforward. When you start talking about mains power off-grid, so using inverters, higher power devices, air fryers, induction cooktops, air conditioners and the like, you really want to have both a battery system, but a charging system from a solar point of view as well. That is going to be, I guess, making the best use of the products that we got, but also doing what we can to reduce the current that's going to be drawing in or out of the system. Certainly when we start talking about running the air fryer, the air conditioner, those sorts of things at 1800 watts, those sorts of things, you're getting into current levels that are substantially higher than what you're going to be running if it's just a fridge and those sorts of things, right? So you want to have an efficient system. You don't want to have excessive losses in those power conversion processes from 12 through to the 240 volt for your appliances. And it gives us the ability to do things like stepping up the size of the inverter compared to what you would run at 12 volts, because when you're doubling the voltage, you're actually halving the current for the same amount of watts, right? So less current, less heat. Less heat means better efficiency. And summertime conditions in Australia, you're already running at very high temperatures. So if we can try and keep everything that we're running cooler, they're going to run a lot more efficiently. There's less wastage of your power. You've got an infinite power source in the sky, but you only have that for a certain number of hours per day, right? So you've got to make use of the power that you can produce and store, and then you want to use that as efficiently as you can. A couple of other reasons, I guess, because you are running half current compared to what it would be on for the same power on a 12 volt system. Certainly things like solar, the cabling, the size of the cables that you run from your inverters to your batteries, all that sort of stuff are all able to be much smaller cable sizing because the current rates are lower.
Which is going to be a weight saving,
a cost saving. Saves in weight, a cost saving. Certainly from an installation point of view, it's easier to bend, it's easier to work with. Smaller lugs, everything fits a little bit easier and those sorts of things. So, and
then again, less heat, so more efficient again there.
Less losses in the conversion from 24 volt to 230 volts compared to 12 volt to 230.
Of course,
So there's a few percent in that, obviously, as well. There's lots of little things that build up to be, a larger sort of benefit, I guess. From that.
And then the battery bank itself, if we'd built the same size system out of 12 volt batteries, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to have a bigger footprint. It's going to take up more room. It's going to be slightly heavier, although it's essentially the same amount of cells. They're just wired differently.
Correct. Sometimes it comes down to having multiple batteries in parallel, potentially. Each battery that you put in has another BMS, so you've got a little bit of extra cost if you've got more BMS compared to one larger bank. So again, there are sort of small incremental benefits by doing that. but certainly from an installation point of view, it's less labour, the cables are easy to run, they're smaller, they're lighter.
Yeah.
And because we have to run solar at high voltages to charge the high voltage battery, you then got less voltage drop from your solar cables down to your controllers and those sorts of things. So again, you can run smaller cables. And when you're trying to get cables from on the roof down through voids and cupboards and stuff like that, through back down to where your batteries sit, you want to have smaller cables. It's easy to run without any excess losses. So
okay. And in terms of complications with running a 12-volt system, basically, I wasn't quite sure how we were going to go, but there seems to be a lot of aftermarket accessories for 24-volt that support 24-volt.
Certainly.
And I guess that's because of the trucking industry and that sort of stuff, because it's 24-volt in most trucks already, isn't it?
Yeah, trucks. I mean, all light vehicles run 12-volt, obviously, as we know. There's a number of trucks and buses and motorhomes and stuff like that run 24-volt.
Yeah.
But there's certainly nothing that runs 48 volts.
Yeah, and I know that's something that people are going to ask, because there's obviously a lot of benefits for going 24 volt from 12 volt, and it is the same benefits going 36, 48.
Correct.
But there's a sweet spot, because
the incremental benefit in terms of a percentage, in terms of the efficiency benefits, gets smaller and smaller as it goes from 36 to 40 volt, 48 volts. But there is not lots of options out there in terms of 36 or 48 volt in terms of chargers. Certainly there's not a DC-DC charger. So if you're wanting to charge from your alternator, there is certainly 48 volt options in terms of inverters, but they do tend to step up in cost.
Absolutely.
Physical sizes, they tend to also be larger. And you know, if you're travelling around the country, you go in remote areas and out bush and stuff like that, it does become harder and harder to find, products to replace if you had a problem.
True, yep.
You know, something got damaged through corrugations or whatever, or, you know, you just had a product issue, or whatever the case may be. It's less likely to find somebody in remote, and even in the cities with the 48 volt options.
Right.
You also start to get into solar voltages.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you have a higher voltage in the battery, you've got to have higher voltage in your solar, right? So when you start to step up into that, you can start to step into voltages that you then need electricians to install, as opposed to an auto electrician doing the installation.
Yeah.
Those components do start to step up in price in the solar arena, I guess. The higher the voltage, you get step changes in prices as well. So you start to lose that efficiency and cost and stuff as well.
Yeah.
For the other benefits are sort of weighed out. So.
And then there's extra complications with the solar as well, isn't there? Because to get the voltage to get a charge, to be able to charge the battery system, you've got to start to link up sort of 3 panels at a time.
Correct, yeah. It's easy on a house, for example, where you can put as many panels as you need to make those voltages up. But on a caravan, you've got vents and hatches and aircons and TV aerials and all that sort of stuff. So you're limited in the space that you have.
Yeah.
You're also limited in how many you can put in a string to get the right voltage. So you might need to put 3 panels together in a series in a string to get the right voltage for a 48 volt battery.
Yes.
If you then wanted another string, you then have to have space for 3 more panels as well.
You can't just add 1 more panel.
Yeah, so it's not as simple as it is with 12 and 24 volt systems.
Okay.
Yep.
And I should mention that before this build took place or anything, when we first started talking about what we wanted to do, we had every option available to us.
Correct.
There was no reason why we can't do 12 volt and have several batteries in parallel.
That's
always
correct.
get that wrong.
Yeah, in parallel, yes.
Or go the 24 volt option,
Correct.
or go 36, or go 48. I mean, there's nothing stopping us from doing any of that, but we think this is probably the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's stepping up to 48 volts is the kind of thing that you would do if you had a battery bank in an off-grid house, for example, where you're going to have larger daily consumption and you can run higher solar voltages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's not many options in any of the brands across the country in terms of 36 volts.
Yeah.
There's not lots of gear out there for that purpose. So 12 and 24 are commonly used across the industry, Australia-wide. You can get parts and materials for those voltages very easily and widely available. And that's sort of the preference. But it's best to size or select the voltage of your battery bank depending on each individual application. We do plenty of similar products where we use a 12-volt battery system because the solar array is not going to work with a higher voltage system, and you stick with 12-volt, or the current rate that's going to be running, you're not going to be running those higher current devices all the time, so then it makes sense to stick with the 12-volt. One of the benefits you're getting out of this is that the inverter, we are able to, because we're running half the current, we've actually stepped up to a 3,000 watt inverter at 24 volts, whereas that would be a very high current demand from a 12 volt system.
A lot more expensive as well. When
it steps up
if
in
you
price,
try to get a 3,000 watt inverter off 12 volts.
That's right. Yeah.
But that's going to be really handy because I should be able to run the aircon and other appliances. I'll have to test all that.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
You'll be able to have the aircon running and turn the microwave on at the same time, for example. Kettles and other things, they're too much for those systems. But certainly you'll be able to do that with this.
Cool. And I like that you touched on, and that's something that you do, which I really like. There's not one system for everyone.
Correct.
Everything is highly individual.
Everybody uses different appliances, has different power consumption needs each day. And how often you use them and what devices you use and at what times of the day. It's important to size and select the products that you're going to use for your application, not based on what somebody else told you on Facebook.
Or a YouTube video or anything. No, you need to actually speak to people and know what they're talking about.
Everybody's needs are going to be different. So
Absolutely.
It's important to size that appropriately.
Cool. I reckon we've covered most of that. You happy with that?
Yep.
Cool. Appreciate that, mate.
No
Thank you for your time.
Okay, that's all good.
So to summarise all of that, 24 volt for me in this instance worked out slightly cheaper, slightly lighter, slightly smaller footprint, more efficient, and there were also meant that we could run lighter cable to inverters and solar and stuff because the voltage was higher, which again is a weight and cost saving, and also potentially a labour saving because it was easier to route the smaller cables. I don't know about that. But it was all wins. Anyway, all these things needed to be taken into account when designing this system. I think the fellas have absolutely nailed it. Andy Day, the electrician / mechanic, dual trade that works there, he's done an amazing job of this. That bloke is like a wizard for auto electrics. Jason, you're an absolute gentleman looking after me. You know, you always have. 6 years I've been running your batteries and they're a really good thing. So there was no other company I was going to look at for doing this build. You guys are awesome. I'm going to be with Offroad Living at the Full Drive show this year in November, 4, 5, 6, I think. I'll have the car on display with the amazing build they've done in that. Come say g'day to me, have a look at the car. We'll talk caravans, whatever, be good. Actually, one more thing I just wanted to cover before I wrap this video up. Someone asked me a really good, relevant question. He said, Cam, you've pulled your lead acid battery out, you've put a lithium battery bank in. Everyone knows lithium's lighter, but no one ever talks about how much weight they've actually added, because I took one battery out and then I put a battery system in that's 7 to 8 times the size. There's obviously a weight gain there. Yeah, really good question, and something that was really important to me because I didn't want to go too big and add too much weight because I've still got GCM limitations with the D-Max. So real world figures here, the 4 panels up top, they're about 10 kilos each. The 2 batteries I've put in are about 28 kilos each. The panel on the back with the inverter and stuff, I have no idea what it weighs, unfortunately. I couldn't tell you that. But we're looking in the realm of about 100 kilos I've added to the weight of the Caravan, somewhere around there. Also, I don't know how much the cables and all that weigh, but we have fairly short runs of cable. Like from inverter to the batteries is really close, so it wouldn't be too much. So somewhere in the realm of 100 kilos I've added. I've pulled out one 33 kilo battery, so I've added about 65 kilos of weight to run this system that is 7 to 8 times the usable capacity of what this van came with. Also remember, this Caravan came with one lead acid battery. That was not enough to run anything in this Caravan. It would have done, that's not true, but it would have been struggling to run a compressor fridge. It just wouldn't have been usable. Not one 100 amp hour AGM. Maybe 2, you'd still be pressing it because these fridges use a bit of juice when it starts to get warm. So if I had 2 of those batteries, it would have been 66 kilos in here. I added 100, so like 35 kilos difference to add something that would have been, 3 to 5 times usable capacity of the lead acid system. Geez, I've thrown some numbers at you. I hope I haven't confused you too much. I hope I haven't lost you. Yeah, it's a good thing. 24 volt, big battery bank, lots of solar. I'm going to be able to run the aircon off grid. The air fryer, air fried dim sims, they'll change your life. it's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited. Anyway, I'll let you know how it goes as I'm using it, and I'll see you in the next video. The next video is going to be a shakedown trip of this caravan, and we went away for a couple of days, and the van, we had a few hiccups before we left with some dramas, but the van performed pretty well while we were away. Yeah, so all that next week. Cheers, guys. See you then.